Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is the second in a short series of commentaries I'm doing on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, this time for the episode Creatures from the Tar Swamp. Let's talk about the He-Man intro narration sequence that introduces us to the show so well and so memorably each time. Iconic isn't really the word for it because it's inadequate. I'm not sure there is a word strong enough to describe just how incredibly iconic this opening became. It's incredibly striking, it's incredibly visually pleasing and orally pleasing, orally as into the ears. It gives you lots of information about the show that's very pertinent and really gets you in the mood. It's absolutely brilliantly done and etched itself word for word, shot for shot into my mind for all time when I was little, and I'm sure the minds of the other fans, young fans who were watching as well. Absolutely brilliant stuff and something very much associated with the show, with memories of He-Man, and indeed that's what a good opening does. It grabs the attention and it stays in the memory and it recalls fond memories of the show when you see it and or think about it. Absolutely brilliant stuff there. Of course, they realised how brilliant it was when they were making She-Ra. Now, I've heard someone say on documentary or episode commentary how the idea was, well, the He-Man intro works so brilliantly and everyone likes it so much and finds it so appropriate in so many ways. Let's do the same thing with She-Ra, change some of the words round and introduce it in the same way. I think that worked pretty well too and linked He-Man and She-Ra together quite nicely. Though I always noticed that missing from the She-Ra intro was the equivalent of Cringer became the mighty Battle Cat, whereas Spirit became the flying unicorn Swiftwind. It's just not in there. You just have to see it for yourself happening on screen, and for blind viewers, they just don't care that you won't get to know. But here we are with Creatures from the Tar Swamp, and I was talking in my previous commentary about an establishing scene, establishing regular characters rather well. This one does the same thing. Man-at-Arms, Orko, Teela, King and Queen to some extent, Adam to some extent, but it mainly establishes our main guest star for this episode, a memorable guest star, voiced in a very haughty, posh way by Linda Gary, who voices 95% of the women on this show. Lady Edwina, who plays a huge role in this episode and is part of the character journey that Orko goes on and is going on now, trying to buy friends with presents. What a lovely brooch. She doesn't think much of it, and she doesn't think much of Orko. And, yeah, Orko learns a very important lesson by the end of this. Don't bother giving gifts to stupid people who don't really like you. They're not worth it. I was struck here with this bit of character interplay between Adam, Teela, and Orko when I first watched the video. How, we're getting a bit more of Adam as a character here. Giving some advice to Orko, sympathising with Orko, teaming up with Teela, being Orko's friends, Orko's family, adopted family, helping him out emotionally. So that was quite nice use of Adam, which was missing from the first episode on the tape that I used to have, Like Father, Like Daughter. And this is a very interesting bit of history, flashback, with young Adam and Cringer stuck in the tar swamp. And it's Orko's origin story, or origin on Eternia story, and it gets used and referenced a great deal in later episodes, and indeed adapted very closely into Orko's origin story in the 2002 series, which I'm going to do a commentary on that episode from the 2002 series and talk about how Larry DiTillio, a writer from the old series, adapting this whole sequence with Adam and Cringer and Orko and the Tar Swamp into the new series helps the new series out a lot when it's rather struggling to find its feet. And here I was very interested to see it in the second of the 2 episodes of He-Man on video, the only episodes I thought I was ever going to have and be able to watch. Orko turns up and saves Adam and Cringer, and that's how he got involved with the gang, and they adopted Orko, and that's how he became a hero. And Adam has doubtless told this to Lady Edwina to impress her in some way, despite what he was saying to Orko earlier about not trying to impress her, go out of his way to impress her. But of course, I suppose the point is Adam is building up Orko with this heroic deed that he's actually done, that's actually important to him as a person, as a character, tells Lady Edwina what he's really like, rather than trying to buy her attention with a flashy present like Orko himself was doing. So that's a good idea, I suppose. Let Lady Edwina know some of Orko's good points, best points, his most heroic deed, and let her make up her mind about him from there. But of course she takes the wrong thing away from the story. She is such a clueless, haughty, snooty, out of touch with reality, privileged royal character. All she really picks up from the story is Orko had this magic medallion that he's lost in the Tar Swamp, and it's too bad he doesn't have it now. And that's all she's got from the story, rather than, wow, that was brave and exciting and shows Orko to be a great hero. And yeah, that's Lady Edwina for you. And she's not really going to change or learn anything in the episode. She's just going to help Orko to learn that valuable lesson. But until she mends her rude and selfish ways, she won't be welcome in Eternos, and quite rightly so. As I mentioned in my previous commentary, I was pleased here to see Evil Lyn turning up at the Tar Swamps with Skeletor and Beastman. One thing I thought was, oh, she's not yellow in the cartoon. I didn't think she was yellow in the cartoon, like she is in the action figure. I had a lot of second-hand action figures from the original Masters of the Universe timeline, and I couldn't quite remember how accurate some of them were to what I'd seen on screen in the cartoon a few years previously. But I wasn't surprised to see, but I wasn't completely sure, Evil Lyn isn't yellow. She's flesh-coloured. I just find it interesting to remember some of the things I first thought and remembered when I first watched this on video, and that was one of them. One thing I didn't pick up from the 2 episodes, this one and the last one, was that Orko had popped in to the picture there in the Season of Storms from a place called Troller, and that was his homeland. But it's actually mentioned by name twice in this episode. Orko says this isn't Troller, and Skeletor in a bit is going to call Orko a troublesome Trollin. But I didn't really pick that up for a while. And then when I got the DVDs and they were going about Troller and visiting Troller, I thought, oh yeah, it does mention Troller in the Creatures from the Tar Swamp episode. I just hadn't really picked up on it before. And I also didn't really realise from these how Orko's magic doesn't work properly, or works backwards, or is affected badly in some way by being on Eternia rather than in his own dimension. They make a lot of that in some episodes, but they don't mention it specifically in like Father Like Daughter or Creatures from the Tar Swamp. And once I've seen the DVDs and look back, I think, oh yeah, Orko's magic isn't working often quite how he wants, quite how it should, but it's not obvious from these 2 episodes. So there were certainly plenty of things I didn't pick up from the video before I got the DVDs. And there's a transformation sequence, which I promised I would talk about this time, and like the opening, it is extremely iconic, more iconic than I can put into words. Of course, the whole thing is in the opening sequence as well, which works really well. You see it at the beginning there, and then when you see it in context in the episode, that's really, really exciting. Is it the most famous, most well-loved, most remembered overall by the most people for the longest amount of time piece of animation from 80s cartoons, the He-Man transformation sequence? It should definitely be a prime candidate for that award, and there may be some other things that could be in the mix as well. Lion-O activating the Eye of Thundera, perhaps something like that. But He-Man transformation sequence would definitely win for me, hands down. And, well, perhaps if you put it to the vote, it would come out on top if you asked enough relevant people who were around in the 80s and remember them fondly like I do. I rather suspect the He-Man transformation sequence would come out on top there. There's a Wind Raider crashing sequence there that we've just seen. When I first watched the video, the Shrieker bird rips off the wing. He-Man goes, "Look, Cap, Man-at-Arms and Teela are in trouble. No, they're going to crash." And I was like, well, are you going to do anything about it? Are you going to rush and save them and catch the Wind Raider? But no, He-Man does absolutely nothing and the Wind Raider blows up. But then, of course, Stratos is there. He happens to be in the area, so he flew down to help, to rescue them. And I thought, well, that's a bit useless of He-Man. And he's a bit useless in this scene too, where he gets carried off by the Shrieker, but that always makes me laugh. From Skeletor, wonderful Alan Oppenheimer as Skeletor. I'm taking my Dracodon to lunch at the palace. I'm sorry, He-Man, but you weren't invited. And off he goes. I've always liked that little bit. But I was definitely pleased to see Stratos on the video, the second episode on the video. He was another action figure that I had, and I was pleased to see, oh yes, there he is in the show. I suppose who we are missing from this pair of episodes from the video, like Father Like Daughter and Creatures from the Tar Swamp, as well as Merman, who really should be there, is Ram Man, who's the main other good guy you see around in the very early episodes, as well as Stratos and all the main ones from Eternos, obviously. But there we go, at least I got to see Stratos. And yeah, that bit with the Wind Raider makes me think how they're rather dangerous, those Wind Raiders. When I watch He-Man all the way through, they're flying along in a Wind Raider all the time, it usually crashes. For some reason, to help the plot in some way, to get them crashed in some certain place, the Wind Raiders usually crash. They're very dangerous things, and as we've seen in this particular episode, one little bit comes off, the wing comes off, a little bit gets dented, and they just crash. They're not fitted with safety devices or anything. They don't usually even have, like, parachutes when they're in them. Ram Man has a parachute when he's been launching himself into the air at one point, coming down on a parachute looking rather silly. They should all wear parachutes at all times when they're in the Wind Raiders. Because, yeah, they are incredibly dangerous. And I thought I'd mention that point here, because I saw it in this episode on the video, and it holds true in many other episodes where Wind Raiders crash. As I was mentioning on the previous commentary, Queen Marlena is in this episode a bit, which I was quite pleased about when I first saw it. Of course, what I didn't realise is that she doesn't have her usual voice. Usually, she, like most of the women, is voiced by Linda Gary. Occasionally, you'll get Erica Scheimer doing a woman on this, but she mainly does children, young boys, and sometimes girls. And that's Erica Scheimer's big talent, what she's really very good at, engaging at, doing the young boys' voices. But she does some women as well. Linda Gary does most of the women very well, of course. But to give her a little break from Queen Marlena sometimes, Jay Scheimer, that's Lou Scheimer's wife, Erica Scheimer's mother, comes in and takes over Queen Marlena for an episode, and it is quite a different voice from Linda Gary's. Sounds quite like Erica Scheimer, which is not surprising, as they are mother and daughter. There's an example of Orko's magic not really working how he wanted. Banish these bars and let us go free. Hey, it worked! Well, kinda. And I think, oh yeah, that links in with the whole thing about Orko's magic not working quite how he wants, quite right. But as I say, I just didn't notice that when I watched the video, the 2 episodes on video. It wasn't really gone into, and it wasn't self-evident enough to really strike me. So yeah, that was a surprise when I got the DVDs. Queen Marlena was mostly being done by Linda Gary, so, you know, I was pleased that she was in this one, the 2nd episode on the tape, when I first got it, but little did I know I was missing out on her main voice, her better voice. And thank goodness I was able to get it on DVD. I mean, I think Linda Gary probably is her better voice. She is the proper, experienced, versatile voice actress, and whenever Queen Marlena has a big part to play, she'll be Linda Gary. It's really only when she pops in and says occasional things, as she does in this episode, that she's Jay Scheimer. She really doesn't do anything. She just pops in saying, "Are you alright, Orko?" and maybe one other thing that I can't remember what it is just now. And there are other episodes where she's Jay Scheimer and she doesn't really say very much. I think we should all go to the kitchen and cook up some food. She doesn't even say very sensible stuff. But when she's doing big, important character episodes, such as the beginning of Teela's Quest, where she has her moments with Adam, and the Rainbow Warrior, which I'm going to commentate on, of course, she's always Linda Gary, as she should be. And the only voice actor I haven't given a name shout out to now in this episode commentary is John Irwin, the wonderful voice of He-Man and many other characters such as Ram-Man and Beast-Man. He picks up a lot more along the way, such as Webster and Whiplash and others, and many guest stars as they all do. And John Irwin as He-Man, I mean, come on, you're not going to find a better voice acting performance than that anywhere, really, are you? Just the right amount of heroism, just the right amount of tongue-in-cheek, just the right amount of everything, really. The perfect He-Man voice. Absolutely brilliant. And all the voice actors, as I say, are absolutely brilliant. But you've got to really have the lead voice for He-Man as the top priority for this, haven't you? And John Irwin doing this He-Man voice and all his wonderful deliveries. One coming up. One of his heroic lines, "I think you bit off more than you can chew this time. Then again, maybe you didn't." He says all that sort of thing so wonderfully. And that really is, he really is John Irwin in many ways, the heart of the show. Great stuff. And of course, this episode ends with a cheesy cartoon ending. I wish none of this had ever happened. Which isn't a cheesy cartoon ending that you get in The Mummy, the animated series, which is my other group of commentaries that you can find on my channel. But it had its fair share, more than its fair share, The Mummy, of cheesy cartoon endings. And He-Man is not averse to using them either, as we can see here. Of course, Orko is spurred into it by learning his lesson. He's almost charmed by Lady Edwina, and then he finally stands up to her. "You don't like me. You only like the things this medallion can do. And you're quite right, Orko, and what a valuable lesson." But what does that make him say? "I wish none of this had ever happened." And oh dear, that's always a rather disappointing cheesy cartoon ending fix-all way to sort things out, isn't it? But unlike in an episode of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, where they used that cheesy cartoon ending to get out of a very weird situation, apparently everyone remembers what happened but has no longer happened, remembers the timeline. So it's not really that none of this has ever happened, it's just that the effects have gone away, but we all remember it anyway. But there we go, I wouldn't want Orko to forget his valuable lesson, I suppose. And it's not like they've got into a stupid situation where one of the characters has become a genie and can never escape from being a genie unless the whole timeline gets rewritten. So they're okay to all remember what happened. And remember the lessons they've learned. So yeah, I was very pleased with that in many ways, as the second episode on the tape filled in some of the gaps from the first episode, namely Queen Marlena, Stratos, Evil Lyn, a bit more screen time and characterization for Adam, which I did appreciate because it's still mainly He-Man in this episode, but it was nice to see a bit of Adam as Adam doing some character stuff with Orko and Teela. That also reminds me how it struck me how in these two episodes there's no evidence on screen that Orko is in on the He-Man secret. Obviously you get it from the intro, the Sorceress, Man-at-Arms and Orko, but I was a little disappointed that there was none of Orko and Adam, He-Man, wink wink, nudge nudge, we both know the secret, don't we? But I knew definitely that there was a lot of that on episodes that weren't on the tape that I'd seen in the past, and indeed that is the case. So that wasn't something I was in doubt about, like the Sorceress and Zoa being the same entity, but it was something that was a bit disappointing that wasn't there. And that's the end of that one. So hopefully you've enjoyed it and you'll join me again next time for the next commentary in this little series, which will be on The Wizard of Stone Mountain.